Let us pray. Eternal God, as flags fly at half-staff throughout our nation to honor Senator Lindsey, we give thanks to you for his life and for his years of public service. Let us remember with gratitude his commitment to the responsibilities entrusted to him and the many ways he sought to serve the people of this country. Give comfort, strength, and peace to his family, friends, colleagues, and all who mourn his passing. Surround him with your presence in the days ahead, and remind them of the hope that endures even in the midst of grief. May this time of remembrance inspire us to value service over self-interest, compassion over division, and hope over despair. O Lord, support us all the day long, until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes, and the world is hushed, and the food of our life is over, and our work is done. We pray in the name of him who said, I am the resurrection and the life. Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the previous the leadership time is reserved, morning business is closed, and the previous the Senate will proceed to executive session to resume consideration of the following nomination, which the clerk will report. Nomination, the judiciary, Matthew A. Schwartz at New York to the United States Circuit Judge for the Second Circuit. Mr. President, Mr. President, it's sad day for all of us in the Senate, and particularly those that are very, very close to Lindsey Graham, and that would be most senators and legislative staff. So I'd like to take a moment to honor the life of a fellow senator, Lindsey Graham. We were shocked by the sad news yesterday of his untimely death. Senator Graham was a devoted public servant. Through his military service as a colonel in the U.S. Air Force and the National Guard, as well as being elected office continually since 1992. Senator Graham was a very forceful and quick-witted president.
Frequently, Senator Graham would hold court there, and in holding court, he was making every senator laugh, no matter what the challenge we were dealing with on that particular day. He was infectious in the way he told a story, and of course, there was always a punchline. I was no stranger to being the butt of his jokes. Senator Graham loved to tell people how frugal I was, and that if I were ever to open my billfold, dust and moss would come out of it. I don't know how many times I've heard that. Senator Graham always brought a smile to your face and levity to the halls of Congress. Senator Graham was no stranger to my home state of Iowa, as its first in the nation. Criminal justice reform and border security, having Senator Graham in your corner was a great asset. He will be remembered for his many accomplishments as a national figure for the Republican Party. Senator Graham deeply loved his country. He was a bold leader, an impassioned national security hawk. He spoke his mind, as we all know, and we all know that he had the capability and the desire to work across the aisle. He was at the center of some of the most famous deal-making groups in the past 30 years. He loved the Senate as an institution, and his hardworking staff was like family to him. Most importantly, he dutifully served the people of South Carolina, and his roots ran strong through him every day of his life. Barbara and I are praying for Senator Graham's family as we all grapple with the loss of the great man. And I think we can show our appreciation for the hard work as just 2 days before he passed, he was in Ukraine meeting with Zelensky, and he was announcing that he was going to move forward some very important legislation, putting additional sanctions on Russia because of their invasion of Ukraine. And I think we can show our gratitude and appreciation of Senator Graham by moving that legislation forward. I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Elsa-Brooks.
Senate Majority Leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask that the unanimous consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I come to the floor today with a heavy heart. I look to my right, and I see a desk, which we in the Senate refer to and know as the John Calhoun desk. It's covered with a black shroud, and on that top of that shroud is a bowl of white roses. That, Mr. President, is Lindsey Graham's desk. It's difficult to believe that Lindsey Graham is no longer here with us, that we won't run into him at a media day or share a joke with him at this afternoon's vote. The halls of the Senate already feel empty without him. And I know I'm not alone in that feeling. He was a friend to so many of us on both sides of the aisle. And I know that I'm not the only one who finds it difficult to imagine the Senate without Lindsey Graham. Mr. President, the events of Lindsey's life have been well documented over the past couple of days. His humble beginnings in South Carolina, sharing a single room with the rest of his family behind his family's bar. His guardianship of his younger sister, Darlene, after the untimely death of their parents. his long service in the Air Force, the South Carolina Air National Guard, and the Air Force Reserve. His career in politics, first as a member of the South Carolina House of Representatives, then as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, where I served with him for 6 years, and then in the Senate, where he was just completing his 4th term. In the Senate, Lindsey distinguished himself as a staunch conservative and a fierce advocate for South Carolina, but also as someone who was willing to work across the aisle to find common ground and to reach solutions. A lawyer by trade, he serves as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee from 2019 to 2021, where he helped confirm a Supreme Court justice and numerous federal judges, the kind of judges who believe in following the law and the Constitution instead of legislating policy from the bench. Most of all, of course, Mr. President, Lindsey was known for his national security and foreign policy work. There was no bigger believer in America's role in the world. He was confident that the United States could be a force for good, and he gave everything he had to ensuring that we would be. He was a friend and defender of freedom-loving peoples all over the world. He stood with the Ukrainian people in their fight against Russian aggression, and he died with his boots on, having just returned from a trip to Ukraine, his 10th. He believed fiercely in the importance of a strong national defense, in ensuring that our country and our military men and women were always prepared to deter and defeat any threat. But while there was always a lot made of his support for American hard power, he was also a big believer in the use of soft power, economic, diplomatic, and political solutions to the world's problems. I was fortunate to travel with him all over the world, including to Israel after Hamas's October 7th attack. And I saw firsthand the work that he did to promote American security and the security of freedom-loving peoples around the globe. And of course, I don't need to tell anyone in this body that Lindsey was fearless in his commitment to the causes that he espoused. It didn't matter to him whether he would catch flack on an issue. He was undaunted by the politics if he believed he was right on the principle. Senator, warrior, patriot, statesman. Words that will be written about Lindsey. But for me, most of all, Mr. President, he was my friend. Without friends, Aristotle said, no one would choose to live, although he had all other goods. And it's difficult to count the ways in which Lindsey's friendship made this job richer and its burdens lighter. Lindsey was as loyal as they come and a trusted advisor. I could always rely on him for straight-talking advice. He never minced words or pulled punches. I could also rely on him for a steady flow of humor and encouragement. He always could make me laugh, always. In the last couple of years, he came to South Dakota twice, and twice we sat on the deck and watched the sun go down on Lake Oahe. A familiar scene to me, but new to him. And as the stars came out, you could see the Milky Way overhead, and you could hear coyotes howling and rooster pheasants cackling down below. Lindsey's wit punctuated all of it. And I will cherish those memories for a long time to come. Mr. President, if there is any light to be found in this grief, it is this: that as a Christian like Lindsey, I know that death is not the end. The Apostle Paul writes, and I quote, Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him, end quote. Or as another Graham once put it, and I quote, "Someday you will read or hear that Billy Graham is dead. Don't you believe a word of it. I shall be more alive than I am now. I will just have changed my address. I will have gone into the presence of God." End quote. I will miss Lindsey's friendship, Mr. President, more than I can say. We pray for his staff and for his family, whom he loved dearly and who loved him dearly in return. But I am comforted by the knowledge that in the end, he has just changed his address. And that one day, Mr. President, we will laugh together again. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senator from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. President, are we in a quorum call? No? Thank you. Mr. President, last week I joined several of my colleagues from the Senate and the House at the NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey. It was an historic meeting in terms of the future of NATO and the future of Ukraine and so many other issues that relate to that critical and important alliance. Last Wednesday, we had a dinner hosted by the U.S. Ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barak. There must have been 50 or 60 people there, all shared the concerns of the summit conference. Among them were members of Congress, Turkish leaders, and representatives of other countries around the world who'd come to that famous summit. At the heart of that dinner was my colleague and friend, Senator Lindsey Graham. When I arrived that night, it was no surprise that he had been there before me and had been working the crowd, speaking to each and every person who was there, business leader, political leader, from all parts of the world, about his concerns. Lindsey was walking them through, one at a time, his vision on how we could end the war in Ukraine and the legislation we needed to accomplish that. Typical of Lindsey Graham. We all shared that concern, but he was buzzing around that crowd like an aspiring candidate to convince everybody that there was a way to end this war the right way. Mr. President, only a few days after that dinner, my friend Lindsey Graham passed away. It was a shock. I would like to take a moment to recognize his lifetime of public service, both in the state of South Carolina and our nation. I served with Lindsey Graham in the Senate for more than 2 decades, and during that time, I counted him as a trusted friend. I will tell you, Mr. President, that my friends and supporters back in Illinois many times would just shake their head and say, "Durbin, what are you doing with Lindsey? You shouldn't be working with him." They didn't know how the Senate works, and they certainly didn't know him. Lindsey, for many years, was the only Republican willing to co-sponsor the DREAM Act, a bill that I introduced over 20 years ago and reintroduced in successive Congresses, providing protection to undocumented immigrants brought to this country as children. His support took guts at a time when issues surrounding immigration were becoming politically toxic. Lindsey stuck his neck out for me and for these young people. I will never, ever forget it. I'll also never forget a meeting that Lindsey and I had with President Trump in his first term in 2018. It was a meeting to discuss a possible comprehensive immigration reform package. It didn't go well at all. President Trump made what I consider to be profane comments about some immigrants, and I won't repeat them here. Lindsey, sitting next to me in the Oval Office, passionately, vocally, and with real commitment, disagreed with the president, arguing that America is not defined by race or color, but by its ideals and many contributions that immigrants have made to our nation. He said to the president, as I sat right next to him in the Oval Office, "You're just wrong. These people that are immigrants make a difference in America. It's the story of our country," and Lindsey said it was the story of his family. Lindsey spoke publicly about this interaction after it occurred, and despite the scorn that he earned from certain segments of the Republican base, he stuck to what he believed was right. When I happened to become the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee for 4 years, Lindsey Graham was my ranking Republican, sitting right next to me every session of that committee. We had our share of disagreements on issues and nominees, but I knew that his word was always good. If he told me he was going to vote something for something or some person, he did. He delivered. And we had a good working relationship between us. No cheap shots, no stabs in the back. He voted in favor of 75% of the judicial nominations that we considered while I was chair. And there were 235 lifetime appointments that came out of that committee. Even though they were nominated by a president from a political party, he announced early on that if I expect Democrats to vote for Republican nominees, I have to support Democratic nominees to show the same spirit of cooperation. And he did. He kept his word. That was who Lindsey was. He was proud to be a fierce Republican partisan, but he never lost sight of the need to work across the aisle to make a difference in the lives of Americans. Loretta and I send our condolences to Lindsey's family and his legion of friends in South Carolina and around the world. He was an extraordinary member of the Senate. He helped to make it work. There was never any bipartisan meeting of a gang or however you characterize it that Lindsey wasn't in their ranks. I remember when John McCain and he led the Republican side in an immigration reform effort. I was part of that on the Democratic side. After months, literally months of negotiating, we brought a package to the floor which passed with an overwhelming bipartisan vote to show that we can do things like that and we should still be able to. But for those things to occur, it's not just a matter of a good idea. You need good people who are willing to be respectful of one another and to work hard to find common ground. Lindsey was one of those people. As I noted, our trip last week to Turkey was an effort to discuss some of the war and peace issues of our time. Lindsey knew the stakes at play in Ukraine and the importance of standing up to Russian tyranny. This topic was top of mind for all those who attended the NATO summit, which concluded in Turkey last week. I attended the summit with a bipartisan group of senators, including Senators Jeanne Shaheen, Mike Rounds, Chris Coons, and Congressman Mike Turner. Senator Graham joined us as part of the visit as well. With the war in Ukraine entering its 5th bloody year, the timing of this event was important as tides begin to turn in Ukrainian favor. Not only did Ukraine repel the initial invasion by one of the world's largest armies, it is increasingly showing progress in winning this conflict. Russia has been unable to seize additional land and is suffering staggering losses that no political leader can sustain for a war of folly. Ukraine has also increasingly taken the conflict to Russia, weakening its energy and military infrastructure, and turning Russian public opinion against this war in Ukraine. Unlike Russia, Ukraine is careful not to strike civilian targets. I'm happy to report from the NATO summit that the alliance remains determined to see Ukraine defend itself from Russia. Most of the 32-member bloc, formed from the ashes of World War II, have notably increased their defense spending. They are contributing more funding, equipment, and personnel, and are reminding one another of their commitment and importance of this historic alliance. I was glad that President Trump attended the summit. He and President Obama were right to push our allies to pay more of their fair share for the cost of NATO. But President Trump's constant rhetoric belittling the alliance and dreams of conquering Greenland and other follies have been ill-timed, boorish, and counterproductive. They send exactly the wrong message to President Putin about America's resolve and commitment. They put countries such as the Baltic states and Poland at even greater risk of future Russian aggression. Already, Putin is testing the alliance through sabotage, hybrid attacks, misinformation, and assassination. And with the war turning against Russia, Putin may lash out further. This is not the time for President Trump to show Putin any weakness. So I was heartened by the incredible solidarity and resolve on full display at the NATO summit. Quite simply, NATO is alive and well, as is Allied support for Ukraine. Congress continues to show strong bipartisan support for NATO, including through funding, troop-level requirements, and the Baltic Security Initiative. But we can do more, notably helping Ukraine with desperately needed air defense. We should also continue to keep U.S. troop deployment as part of the NATO effort in frontline NATO member states. And we can, at long last, pass one of the two bipartisan Ukrainian bills pending in this chamber, one of them being a sanctions package that Lindsey Graham worked with Senator Blumenthal tirelessly to build support for. I understand that Lindsey had finally arranged for this measure to be introduced even this week. I hope we still go forward with the bill without delay. Lastly, after the NATO summit, we had a chance to visit Hungary, one of our NATO allies. There was a recent election in Hungary that unseated Viktor Orban after 16 years, a period that included democratic backsliding and being a thorn in the side of European efforts to help Ukraine. I want to congratulate the Hungarian people on this peaceful transfer of power and decision to play a more constructive role in European security, including standing with Ukraine. Theirs is a welcome choice that we should support here in the Senate, something I'll do in my remaining time. Mr. President, on a separate subject, last week, President Trump declared that the ceasefire with Iran was over after the United States launched a wave of retaliatory strikes in response to Iran firing on commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. I wish I could say I'm surprised by this, but I'm not. President Trump started this war with a genuine destabilizing regime without thinking it through. As I've said over and over again, a cliche which happens to be accurate. It is a lot easier to get into a war than it is to get out of, as we're learning in Iran every day. Iran's response, striking U.S. and allied targets in the region, holding the strait and global economy hostage, were equally foreseeable. The Iranian regime, much like Vladimir Putin in Russia, seems to be repeatedly trying to humiliate the United States and play for time. The original misstep may have occurred even earlier when President Trump withdrew U.S. from the Iran nuclear agreement during his first term. It was a deal that was working to restrain Iran's nuclear ambitions. Now we seem to be floundering back into a much weaker deal, one that bewilderingly includes billions of dollars to help Iran rebuild. I hope wiser heads will prevail, and I look forward to congressional review of any ensuing deal with Iran as required under the Bipartisan Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks.